It's the Bold Republic Radio Show. My name is Glenn Woods. Thanks for joining me. And because it's Thursday, that means we head on down to Cheyenne, Wyoming, where Charles is hanging on the phone. And you're going to have to tell me your last name again because I'm never going to get it right. Not that I don't know it. I can't pronounce it.
Katibi.
Yeah, I'm never going to get that right. All right. Well, give me credit for trying. Let me try it. Katibi.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. What do you know? I got it right. Well, that was a rare moment. It was a slip-up. It won't happen again, I promise. So you're on with us today to talk about healthcare exchanges and the failure of healthcare exchanges. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Now, let me ask you a quick question because I'd heard this, but I didn't hear confirmation of it. I know Hawaii is in a lot of trouble right now with their healthcare exchange. Did they toss in the towel on that, or is that sucker still up and running?
They have not, actually.
Okay.
They're deciding whether to keep it or not, and it might close as early as this fall. And they're not even the worst offender, the worst problem.
Well, see, when something is that bad, let's say in the state of Hawaii, the answer is you drag it out as long as possible because, there's a little bit of taxpayer money left over, and you've got to get rid of it and make sure that the state's in massive debt before you finally shut the thing down. I mean, that's the plan, isn't it?
That is true, but the money that the federal government made available to set up the exchanges it's only to start them. Once they're ongoing, the states have to pay for them.
So, I want to get to the other states and all the information you have, but the reason I'm focusing on Hawaii is I was talking about them yesterday, and I actually feel bad for the state of Hawaii because they tried to do everything according to the rules as they were set up. And now that it obviously can't work because, Charles, this thing called math, and so it doesn't work. And so now that the whole thing is falling apart on them, they're being punished for something that isn't their fault. I mean, am I wrong about that?
It isn't their fault, but they'd also be wrong to really just believe the hype about this law. When the law came out, states were given a choice whether to go with a federal exchange or build their own exchange.
Right.
And the incentives, the benefits that were offered by the supporters, they said, look, you could have the federal government set it up, or you could build a state exchange yourself. All the startup money would be flipped by the federal government. It would pay for itself. There'd be enough people signing up to pay the fees to keep it running by itself. And in return, you would also get a little bit more freedom over deciding what sort of insurance policies your state would be allowed to offer under the guidelines of the Affordable Care Act. But what we found is that, first, the flexibility wasn't real. Everyone has to comply with the massive cost shifting, the mandates, all the penalties, all that stuff.
So and what they were lied to?
Not lied to.
Okay.
I think a lot of the supporters of the Affordable Care Act in these states, and these states are mostly deep blue states, Hawaii, New York, Massachusetts, California, and they overpromised what sort of flexibility the state exchanges would offer, and they underprojected just what the cost would be to taxpayers. Yeah. So what we've seen is the flexibility wasn't real, and virtually all of them are struggling to stay open and alive.
Right.
California's enrollment projections were they overprojected by 300,000 people signing up, and now their exchange has an $80 million deficit. Washington state overpromised by 20%, and now they're looking at a deficit of another $4 million. So this is a big problem. They were overpromised that they wouldn't have to pay that much.
Right.
And it comes down to a few reasons. One is that and this isn't really an issue that's discussed too much, is that the penalties on the individual mandate, which was supposed to drive all the insured to these exchanges, is too weak. There's the penalty this year is $325 for not signing up for insurance, and next year it's $695. But the average premium on the lowest cost plan on average is $3,000, and that's not talking about co-payments or deductibles. $3,000 just for the premiums. And if you have medical expenses that are the average of somebody between the ages of 18 and 45, that's
Right.
only around $900 a year. There is no reason why you should pay those huge premiums. And most people are just paying the penalty and just paying out of pocket for their care. So this is something that's dealing with a problem for the state exchanges, but it's a problem for the whole country overall and the way the program works in general.
Well, it sounds like, instead of, just wishful thinking, but wishful math, in other words, putting numbers together that they would hope happen, overestimating in some places, underestimating in other places, to put together the numbers that would look right. But I mean, people like me, and I'm sure you as well, I was screaming on the radio, this doesn't make any sense. And I'm no mathematical genius, I can tell you that right now. But I was able to figure this out. It wasn't going to work.
Yeah, it's basically a giant juggling act. They wanted to bring people onto insurance and cajole them, fine them, penalize them, incentivize them with subsidies, but they also didn't want to strong arm them because politically that looks really bad. And the problem isn't just that a lot of people just aren't buying the product. Another big thing is that the people that are going to the exchanges can't even sign up for insurance.
Yeah.
And the reason why is the whole problem with the concept. It was kind of a fool's errand because the whole concept was you would go onto these exchanges, you would put in your information, and you would know immediately with the click of a button if you were eligible for subsidies or not.
Right.
And the reason why it's a fool's errand is because you have to interact with 5 different federal agencies, and their software is entirely obsolete. Some of them have software they haven't updated from the 1970s. So they've been spending hundreds of millions billions of dollars of the federal government to start them up. And once even when they've gotten going, they haven't been able to work properly. Oregon spent $305 million on their exchange, and they didn't successfully sign up a single person.
Yeah. Now, and by the way, they had that really fun song in that commercial for Cover Oregon.
That was hilarious. Yeah.
Oh, geez. Did you see the Reason TV? They did a parody of that.
I didn't, but I saw John Oliver's of it, and it was
I'll have
pretty
to
good
send
as well.
that one to you because it was just hysterical. They basically took the exact cartoon format, and redid it, but singing realistically what's going to happen with the exchange. And it's exactly what they predicted. The only thing that I got wrong was I thought they would at least have some signups. I mean, for Pete's sakes, it's Oregon. That state was the people of that state were all in favor of it until they showed up and again grabbed a calculator and added it up, and it just didn't make any sense.
Yeah, it wasn't for a lack of trying from the legislators or for the voters. They wanted this to work. This was supposed to be the poster child of how a state that wanted Obamacare, this is how it would roll out.
Right.
But it didn't work. They spent $305 million trying to set up the software, trying to hire people to run these equations manually when the software didn't set up, and it cost $305 million and didn't sign up a single person. And the biggest takeaway, I think, is for states, with King v. Burwell coming up, in a little over a month, the Supreme Court is going to decide whether or not the subsidies are available on the federal exchanges. And a choice Wyoming and 35 other states have to make is, should we set up a state exchange and continue to receive subsidies or not?
Right.
And I think what we need to realize is that that is not an easy answer. No one has been able to figure out how to successfully set up these incredibly complex exchanges. And another thing is that these costs will not be foot by the federal government.
That was the next thing I was going to say, because no matter what the federal government promises, ultimately the federal government runs out of money and they can't keep this thing going. And as you and I have already talked about with the math here, we're not talking about a self-sustainable program. Mm-hmm. So I don't care what they promise us. That's why it was the Medicaid expansion that the governor wanted. I was looking at that. He wants all this money to come in from the federal government. Well, Charles, every single day on this program, I do a national debt clock countdown. So I'd really like to ask the governor where he thinks that money is going to come from in the long run.
Well, this isn't even about math. Yeah. This goes back to just the same theory of King versus Burwell. It's about the correct interpretation of the law. Because the law says that the federal government will foot startup expenses only until January of 2015.
Mm-hmm.
So that limit ran out a few months ago. And if the Supreme Court strikes down these subsidies and say that the federal government overreached in its interpretation of the law, they are not going to try and rejig the law again and reinterpret the law to say something different. So states are going to be stuck with these expenses.
Yeah, no matter what. Now, here's something that I worry about with the law. I just did the last hour of the program on the EPA and other, because EPA just did a government overreach in their waters
of the U.S., right? Yeah.
Yeah, and then I also talked about FCC and other government agencies. The bureaucracy basically is flexing its muscle and granting itself powers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I worry because Health and Human Services essentially was given law-making authority in writing what they call the rules to make Obamacare happen. But you and I know that that's writing law.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if the Supreme Court, you're going to have to help me on this one here, if the Supreme Court rules against the Obama administration, can't Health and Human Services just go in there and change the rules, which we know are laws, to make it so, just change the law, which they've already done several times over?
They did not change the law because the proper relationship between Congress and the agencies is Congress writes the law, Congress passes laws, and the agencies interpret them, hopefully legally, and to write the specifics and the technicalities to follow the letter of the law. The problem with what HHS, Health and Human Services, did and the IRS is they incorrectly enforced the law according to how Congress passed Obamacare.
Mm.
It said that the exchanges are only available, the subsidies are only available to exchanges established by a state, and they made them available to everyone when it was clear that only 17 states would sign up for an exchange.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you the cute little way I've noticed, and this is, literally I'll spend, I don't know if you know, Charles, I'm a blowhard. I can go for hours on things like this. And I've spent some time, examining on air about how they cleverly, in the bureaucracy, cleverly get around it. So, for example, the EPA was never given rulemaking authority when it came to CO2. Well, okay, so what they do is declare CO2 a pollutant, which obviously it's not. Now they can go ahead and write regulations. All right, so the FCC obviously was never given authority over the internet. So what they do is they just declare the internet a utility. Now they can do this. See, they find clever ways around it, which is what I worry that Health and Human Services will do. If the court rules against them, well, they'll just find some clever little trick so they can rewrite it.
I was always afraid that is always how the arrangement is going to work out.
Yeah.
They will decide how a rule will be written or decided, and then the courts would just go along with that. But what we've seen with Obama's immigration executive order, that was ruled illegal. We're going to be seeing if King v. Burwell, if those subsidies were distributed improperly. And regarding whether the federal government would distribute new grants to help states set up state exchanges, I don't think they would. I don't think that they would do that right after getting their noses bloodied at King v. Burwell. And I think that that's something too important to remember because these costs aren't temporary; they're ongoing.
Yeah. And
states realize that. In California, there's a whole bunch of states where they're now raising fees and taxes to pay for these the exchanges to make the math work.
Right.
Colorado raised the fees on insurance on the exchanges by $40 million.
Mm-hmm.
In Rhode Island, the governor wants to pass a 4% tax on all insurance policies, whether they're on the exchange or not. So this is something that states that set up the exchanges are stuck with. And this isn't something that the states that didn't go along with exchanges should follow.
On the phone from Wyoming Liberty Group, let me tell you, before I ask you the series of questions you just dumped into my head, and by the way, for those who join us, we're talking about the failing exchanges across the country, Obamacare exchanges. See, Charles, I didn't sign up for the Obamacare exchange on a principle of it, which is this. my insurance gets canceled without my permission, and those were legal contracts that I had signed with willing parties, and then I'm ordered to buy a bunch of stuff that I don't want to buy at prices that a fool would pay. And so you can just forget it. I'm out. So while you're digging through the law, and I suppose in your desk drawer you've got a bunch of aspirin and Pepto-Bismol in order to dig through this thing.
It helps.
I just rejected it flat out. I didn't even want to see the minutia of the law because they had no right to do it in the first place. Yet they're pushing it on us.
Yeah, see, you don't understand. You didn't know how bad your insurance policy was.
Oh,
and
that's
now, yeah. So.
Well, you know something? It's worse than me just being a flathead from flyover country. I'm a Southern boy. The hell do I know about anything? So obviously, they needed to direct me. I needed their guidance or something. So okay, let's get back to where this is where I think the whole thing really does fall apart. More than just it's not affordable for the states, but it's not affordable for the individual. You just got done describing, like, for example, what Colorado had to do. Sounds like a whole bunch of money was just raised on the people of Colorado who were promised that this Obamacare law was going to save them money. I mean, did I read you wrong on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to get worse because it's called the Affordable Care Act. Even though, like you said, all these benefits and distortions are raising the cost of insurance, they can still make the case in some way, twisted way that it's affordable because they're covering the vast majority of the cost of insurance through those subsidies. If the subsidies go away, then people are going to realize that the Affordable Care Act wasn't so affordable after all.
Right. And of course, I always love to. I have a friend that joins us on the program from time to time from the UK, and he was telling me that he was getting free health care. Okay, take a look at your pay stub and tell me that it's free. And he had to finally admit that it wasn't free health care. So, hey, I'm subsidized, so I don't have to pay for it. Really? Let's examine that.
Yeah, but an interesting thing is that those subsidies are only available for a fraction of the population.
Right.
So the majority of the people are still going, even in states that are going to get the subsidies even after this, they're still stuck paying these expensive prices.
Okay, so now in the long run, we also have to take a look at businesses here who just simply can't afford this, and they've been dumping their employees as well. So people can't afford the insurance. The states can't afford it. The businesses can't afford it. I don't mean to get all tin hat conspiracy theory on you. What was the ultimate goal here? To get everybody on government Medicare, Medicaid? The
ultimate goal was to do enough cost shifting so people don't realize just what happened to the cost and what happened to insurance. Because insurance is supposed to take care of things that are unforeseeable, catastrophic events, sudden food poisoning. It's not supposed to be like an electricity bill where you can consume as much as you want and you just get a fixed bill.
Yeah, I'm going to give you something that you can use this. You can steal this from me.
Okay.
When I pay my car insurance, I do not have running low on gas insurance, oil change insurance, car wash insurance, windshield wiper fluid insurance, balding tire insurance. I only cover something catastrophic happening to my car. If I tried to cover all of that, it would be absurd. I wouldn't be able to afford the premiums. So it's the same thing with my health insurance. If I got to go see the eye doctor, I'll pay that out of pocket. I'm not going to cover every little thing. But isn't that what Obamacare is trying to get us to do?
That is. And what people don't understand, when the big argument was over insurance companies covering birth control, people said it should be free, it should be accessible, but you're still paying the premiums, you're still paying the deductions. These are all things, you're not paying for them out of pocket, but everyone is still paying for them, and even the beneficiaries. I mean, it's a total canard.
We're suffering from Stockholm Syndrome at this point.
Exactly.
No, the American people have forgotten how things are paid for.
Yeah.
It is always a pleasure talking to you. I can't wait to have you back on the program again. If you get an update here, by all means, give me a call. I'll even have you on when it's not a Thursday, okay?
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks for coming in, Doctor.